Practicing Zen. The way to study true Zen is not verbal. Just open yourself and give up everything. Whatever happens, study closely and see what you find out. This is the fundamental attitude. Supported from within, we are firmly protected from inside. That is our spirit. We are protected from inside, always, incessantly. So we do not expect any help from outside. In our service, after reciting a sutra, we offer a prayer to dedicate the merit. According to Dogen Zenji, we are not seeking for help from outside because we are firmly protected from inside. That is our spirit. We are protected from inside, always, incessantly, so we do not expect any help from outside. Actually, it is so, but when we recite the sutra, we say a prayer in the usual way. In one of our dedications of merit, we say, "May the two wheels, the Dharma wheel and the material wheel, of the temple go smoothly, and may the calamities which the country and the temple may face, calamities like war, epidemic, famine, fire, water and wind, be averted." Although we say this, actually the spirit is different. We do not observe our way or recite our sutra to ask for help. This is not our spirit. When we recite the sutra, we create the feeling of non-duality, perfect calmness, and strong conviction in our practice. If that kind of feeling is always with us, we will be supported. If we become involved in dualistic, selfish practice to support our building or organization, or to support our personal life, there is not much feeling in our sitting or in our chanting. When we have strong confidence in our way and do not expect anything, we can recite the sutra with a deep feeling, with a deep, calm feeling. That is our actual practice. Dogen Zenji also says that we do not have any idea of dirty or pure, or any idea of calamity or disaster, but even so, we have the practice of cleaning the restroom. Even though your face or mouth or body is clean, when you get up you should wash your face and clean your mouth. If you think cleaning the restroom is dirty work, that is the wrong idea. The restroom is not dirty. Even though you don't clean it, it is clean, or more than clean. So we clean it as a practice, not because it is dirty. If you do it because it is dirty, that is not our way. Our belief is that if the Dharma wheel is turning, then the material wheel will be turning too. If we are not supported by anyone, it means our Dharma wheel is not actually going. This is Dogen Zenji's understanding, and I have tested whether it is true or not, especially during the war when I did not have much to eat. Most priests worked to earn some money to support themselves and their families. My belief was that if I observed the Buddhist way faithfully, people would support me. If no one supported me, it would mean that Dogen's words were not true. So I never asked anyone to give me anything. I just observed the Buddhist way without working as a teacher or as a clerk in the town office. I raised some vegetables and sweet potatoes in my temple garden. That is why I know how to raise vegetables pretty well. I had a spacious garden in front of the temple, so I dug up the ground, took out all of the stones and put in manure. Some villagers came and helped me, and we grew vegetables and we had a good crop. One day, my neighbor came to help me cook. When she opened the rice box, there was no rice at all. I had a pretty big rice box. She was astounded. So she brought me some rice. It was only a little, as she didn't have much rice, but then my neighbors and members of my temple collected rice. I had quite a few members, so I had quite a lot of rice. When people found out that I had a lot of rice, they came to the temple, so I gave my rice to them. The more I gave my rice to them, the more rice I was given. At that time, most people who lived in the city went to the farming families and exchanged whatever possessions they could for food. potatoes, rice, sweet potatoes or pumpkin. But I had no such difficulty. Most of the time I had plenty of food, but I didn't feel so good eating something different from other people, so I tried to eat the same food as they did. Here at Tassajara, the food is wonderful, strong and rich in comparison to the food we had in wartime, so I have not had any complaint about the food. If we observe our way strictly, we will surely be protected by the Buddha. If we observe our way strictly, we will surely be protected by Buddha. We will trust people and we will trust Buddha. Since the war, Japanese priests have started to wear Western suits, giving up their Buddhist robes, unless they are performing a funeral or a memorial service. I don't feel so good about that, so I always wear my robes. When I was coming to America, almost all the priests who were going abroad wore good suits and shiny shoes. They thought that in order to propagate Buddhism, they had to be like the American people. But their heads were not shiny. Their hair was pretty long and well combed rather than shaved off. But even though they buy the best suits and the best shoes, Japanese are Japanese. They cannot be American people, and American people will find some fault in the way they wear their suits or shoes. That is one reason why I didn't come to America in a suit. Another reason was that I was disappointed with priests who changed their robes into suits to support themselves when Dogen said, "We are firmly protected from within." That is our spirit when we say, we pray that the Dharma wheel and the material wheel go smoothly forever. This kind of ceremony is a way to repay the benevolence of the Buddha and Arhats. Buddha and the Arhats are people who supported themselves by depending only on their practice. If we pay full respect to the Arhats by practicing with the same spirit they did, we will also be protected. Dogen says, if we do not practice our way with everyone, with all sentient beings, with everything in the world, on the cosmic stage, that is not the Buddhist way. The spirit of Zazen practice should always be with us, especially when we recite sutras or observe ceremonies. It is not a dualistic or selfish spirit, but it is calm and deep with firm conviction. When we practice in that way, we are always one with the whole Buddha world, where there is no karmic activity, and our everyday life will be protected by the kind of power which pervades everywhere. What is going on in the world of Buddha is just Buddha activity. There is nothing but Buddha activity in the realm of Dharma world. In that way, we do not create any karma. We are beyond the karmic world. With this spirit and this understanding, we observe our way. If we are too involved in the idea of time or taking care of the material world, we will lose our way. A priest will not be a priest when he is completely involved in dualistic practice, involved in a busy life in the busy mundane world. Then there are no more priests. Even though priests are there, they are not practicing the priest's way. So Buddhists should be Buddhists completely. When a Buddhist really becomes a Buddhist, he will be supported as a Buddhist. Thank you very much. Open your intuition. To open your innate nature and to feel something from the bottom of your heart, it is necessary to remain silent. Through this kind of practice, you will have a more intuitive understanding of the teaching. Not to talk does not mean to be deaf and dumb, but to listen to your intuition. The purpose of Seishin is to develop stable practice. In Seishin, we do not communicate with words, but being with each other is still a big encouragement. Verbal communication tends to be superficial, but when you don't speak, deeper communication between you will be encouraged and your mind will become very subtle. Staying silent will open your intuition. Just to stay here without speaking for 5 days is already very meaningful. That is why we do not talk. When you are involved in a superficial conversation based on a passing interest, your true feeling will be covered. So to open your innate nature and to feel something from the bottom of your heart, it is necessary to remain silent. Through this kind of practice, you will have a more intuitive understanding of the teaching. Not to talk does not mean to be deaf and dumb, but to listen to your intuition. The same is true with reading. When you become interested in something you are reading, your intuition does not tend to open. That is why we don't read during session. It doesn't mean to confine yourself in the dark, but by not reading, you will encourage your intuition to open. Even if you are doing koan practice, it is not necessary to speak or to read. Especially for beginners, it may be difficult to remain silent or not to read the newspapers. You may feel very bored, but you should continue your practice. In Seishin, everything will be taken care of by the old students, who will help the newer students to practice deeply. Just sit and see what happens. Try to keep the right posture according to the instructions and follow the rules. Following the rules lets you find yourself. The rules let you know what time it is, when to eat, and how to walk. If there are no rules and no one is taking care of you, it is rather difficult to practice. So the rules will be a great help. It is much better than not having any rules and sitting in a corner of the room 5 days without doing anything. The rules are not something to restrict you, but something to support your practice. There are various ways to practice: following the breath, counting the breath, or koan practice. This time I recommend following the breath. When you find it difficult to follow the breath, then counting the breath will be a help. Then you will know exactly what you are doing. If your practice gets lost, you will notice immediately. When you practice following the breath, don't make too much effort to make your breathing slow down or deepen or anything like that. If you just follow your breath, then naturally your breathing will appropriate for your practice. If you just follow your breath, then naturally your breathing will be appropriate for your practice, even though you don't adjust it. Various instructions will be given to you to help your practice. We do not give instructions in order to force you to do some special practice. It does not mean you should do this or you shouldn't do that. You may have various instructions, but practice is up to you. Thank you very much. Find out for yourself. Whatever happens, whether you think it is good or bad, study closely and see what you can find out. This is the fundamental attitude. Sometimes you will do things without much reason, like a child who draws pictures whether they are good or bad. If that is difficult for you, you are not actually ready to practice Zazen. In your Zazen, or in your life, you will have many difficulties or problems. When you have a problem, see if you can find out for yourself why you have a problem. Usually, you will try to solve your difficulty in the best way as soon as possible. Rather than studying for yourself, you ask someone why you have a problem. That kind of approach may work well for your usual life, but if you want to study Zen, it doesn't help. The moment you are told something by someone and you think you understand, you will stick to it and you will lose the full function of your nature. When you seek something, your true nature is in full activity, as if you are feeling for your pillow in the dark. If you know where the pillow is, your mind is not in full function. Your mind is acting in a limited sense. When you are seeking for the pillow without knowing where it is, then your mind is open to everything. In this way, you will have a more subtle attitude toward everything, and you will see things as it is. If you want to study something, it is better not to know what the answer is, because you are not satisfied with something you are told, and because you cannot rely on anything set up by someone else, you study Buddhism without knowing how to study it. In this way, you find out for yourself what we really mean by Buddha nature, practice, or enlightenment. Since you seek freedom, you try various ways. Of course, you will sometimes find that you have wasted your time. If a Zen master drinks sake, you may think, the best way to attain enlightenment is to drink sake. But even though you drink a lot of sake, as he does, you will not attain enlightenment. It may look like you've wasted your time, but that attitude is important. If you continue to try to find out in that way, you will gain more power to understand things. Whatever you do, you will not waste your time. When you do something with a limited idea or with some definite purpose, what you will gain is something concrete. This will cover up your inner nature. So it is not a matter of what you study, but a matter of seeing things as it is and accepting things as it is. Some of you may study something only if you like it. If you don't like it, you ignore it. That is a selfish way, and it also limits your power of study. Good or bad, small or big, we study to discover the true nature. We study to discover the true reason why something is so big and why something is so small, why something is so good and why something is not so good. If you try to discover only something good, you will miss something and you will always be limiting your faculties. When you live in a limited world, you cannot accept things as it is. Even if a Zen master had just 2 or 3 students, he would never tell them our way in detail. The only way to study with him is to eat with him, talk with him, and do everything with him. You help him without being told how to help him. Mostly, he will not seem to be very happy, and he will always be scolding you without any apparent reason. Because you cannot figure out the reason, you will not be so happy, and he will not be so happy. If you really want to study with him, you will study how to please him, how to make your life with him a happy one. You may say that this way of practice is very old-fashioned. It may be so, but I think you had this kind of life in Western civilization too, although not exactly as we did in Japan. The reason why people had a difficult time with their teachers is that there is no particular way for us to study. Each one of us is different from the other, so each one of us must have our own way, and according to the situation, we should change our way. You cannot stick to anything. The only thing to do is to discover the appropriate way to act under new circumstances. For instance, in the morning we clean. We do not have enough rags or brooms, so it is almost impossible to participate in our cleaning. Under these circumstances, it is still possible to figure out something to do. I don't scold you very much, but if I were a strict Zen master, I would be very angry with you, because you give up quite easily. Oh no, there is not much cleaning equipment, or there is nothing for me to do. You are prone to think this way and easily give up. In such a case, please try hard to figure out how to practice. If you are very sleepy, you may think it's better to rest. Yes, sometimes it is better, but at the same time it may be a good chance to practice. When I was at Aiheiji assisting my teacher, he did not tell us anything, but whenever we made a mistake, he scolded us. The usual way to open sliding doors is to open the one on the right, but when I opened it that way, I was scolded. Don't open it that way, not that side. So the next morning, I opened the other side and got scolded again. I did not know what to do. Later, I found out that the day I opened the right side, his guest was on the right side, so I should have opened the other side. Before opening the door, I should have been careful to find out which side his guest was on. The day I was appointed to serve him, I gave him a cup of tea. Usually, you fill 80% of the cup. Since that is the rule, I filled 80% or 70%, and he said, "Give me hot tea, fill the cup with very hot, strong tea." So the next morning, when there were some guests, I filled all the cups with hot, strong tea, almost 99%, and served them. I was scolded. Actually, there is no rule. He himself liked very hot, bitter tea, filled to the brim, but almost all the guests didn't like hot, bitter tea. For him, I should serve bitter, hot tea, and for the guests, I should offer tea the usual way. He never told us anything. When I got up 20 minutes earlier than the wake-up bell, I was scolded. "Don't get up so early, you will disturb my sleep." Usually, if I got up early, it was good, but for him, it was not so good. When you try to understand things better, without any rules or prejudice, this is the meaning of selflessness. You may say that something is a rule, but rules are already a selfish idea. Actually, there are no rules. So when you say, "This is the rule," you are forcing something, the rules, on others. Rules are only needed when we don't have much time, or when we cannot help others more closely in a kind way. To say, "This is the rule, so you should do it," is easy, but actually, that is not our way. For the beginner, maybe instruction is necessary, but for advanced students, we don't give much instruction, and they try out various ways. If possible, we give instructions to people one by one. Because that's difficult, we give group instruction or a lecture like this. But don't stick to the lecture. Think about what I really mean. I feel sorry that I cannot help you very much, but the way to study true Zen is not verbal. Just open yourself and give up everything. Whatever happens, whether you think it is good or bad, study closely and see what you find out. This is the fundamental attitude. Sometimes you will do things without much reason, like a child who draws pictures whether they are good or bad. If that is difficult for you, you are not actually ready to practice Zazen. This is what it means to surrender, even though you have nothing to surrender, without losing yourself by sticking to a particular rule or understanding. This is what it means to surrender, even though you have nothing to surrender, without losing yourself by sticking to a particular rule or understanding. Keep finding yourself, moment after moment. This is the only thing for you to do. Thank you very much. Be kind with yourself. We put emphasis on warm heart, warm Zazen. The warm feeling we have in our practice is, in other words, enlightenment or Buddha's mind. I want you to have the actual feeling of true practice, because even though I practiced Zazen when I was young, I didn't know exactly what it was. Sometimes I was very impressed by our practice at Aiheiji and other monasteries. When I saw great teachers or listened to their lectures, I was deeply moved, but it was difficult to understand those experiences. Our aim is to have complete experience or full feeling in each moment of practice. What we teach is that enlightenment and practice are one, but my practice was what we call step-ladder Zen. I understand this much now, and next year, I thought, I will understand a little bit more. That kind of practice doesn't make much sense. I could never be satisfied. If you try step-ladder practice, maybe you too will realize that is a mistake. If we do not have some warm, big satisfaction in our practice, that is not true practice. Even though you sit trying to have the right posture and counting your breath, it may still be lifeless Zazen. because you are just following instructions. You are not kind enough with yourself. You think that if you follow the instructions given by some teacher, then you will have good zazen. But the purpose of instruction is to encourage you to be kind with yourself. Do not count your breath just to avoid your thinking mind, but to take the best care of your breathing. If you are very kind with your breathing, one breath after another, you will have a refreshed, warm feeling in your zazen. When you have a warm feeling for your body and your breath, then you can take care of your practice and you will be fully satisfied. When you are very kind with yourself, naturally you will feel like this. A mother will take care of her child even though she may have no idea how to make her baby happy. Similarly, when you take care of your posture and your breathing, there is a warm feeling in it. When you have a warm feeling in your practice, that is a good example of the great mercy of Buddha. Whether you are a priest or a layperson, this practice will extend to your everyday life. When you take the utmost care of what you do, then you feel good. Tozan Ryokai attained enlightenment many times. Once, when he was crossing a river, he saw himself reflected in the water and composed a verse. Don't try to figure out who you are. If you try to figure out who you are, what you understand will be far away from you. You will have just an image of yourself. Actually, you are in the river. You may say that it's just a shadow or a reflection of yourself. But if you look carefully with a warm-hearted feeling, that is you. You may think you are very warm-hearted, but when you try to understand how warm, you cannot actually measure. Yet, when you see yourself with a warm feeling in the mirror or the water, that is actually you. And whatever you do, you are there. When you do something with a warm-hearted feeling, Manjushri, the Bodhisattva of wisdom, is there, and there is the true you. You don't have to wonder where Manjushri is or what he is doing. When you do things with your warm-hearted mind, that is actual practice. That is how to take care of things. That is how to communicate with people. Some of you are priests, and some are not priests, and each of you will go your own way. Those of you who are not married and those of you who are married each have your own way of extending practice to your everyday lives. Although our situations are different, practice is the same and we all meet Manjushri. Even though he is one, he is everywhere, with everyone and everything. Whatever you do, whatever your practice is, Manjushri is there. The secret is not to forget the true mercy of Buddha, who takes care of everything. If we lose this point, whatever we do doesn't make sense. So we put emphasis on warm heart, warm zazen. The warm feeling we have in our practice is, in other words, enlightenment, or Buddha's mercy, Buddha's mind. It is not a matter of just counting your breath or following your breath. If counting the breath is tedious, it may be better just to follow the breath. But the point is, while inhaling and exhaling, to take care of the breath just as the mother watches her baby. If a baby smiles, its mother will smile. If a baby cries, its mother is worried. That kind of close relationship, being one with your practice, is the point. I'm not talking about anything new, the same old things. Our monastic rules are based on kind, warm-hearted mind. The idea is not to restrict your freedom, but rather to give you freedom to behave and act in your own way. It is not so important to follow the rules literally. Actually, If you break a rule now and then, we will know what is wrong with you, and your teacher, without criticizing you, may be able to help you more accurately. This is how to improve your practice in order to have good control over your desires and your everyday life. Then you will have a big freedom from everything. That is the goal of your practice, both for priests and for lay people. Please take care of your practice. Be very kind with yourself. Thank you very much. Respect for things. Instead of respecting things, we want to use them for ourselves. And if it is difficult to use them, we want to conquer them. In our Zazen practice, we stop our thinking and we are free from our emotional activity. We don't say there is no emotional activity, but we are free from it. We don't say we have no thinking, but our life activity is not limited by our thinking mind. In short, we can say that we trust ourselves completely, without thinking, without feeling, without discriminating between good and bad, right and wrong, because we respect ourselves, because we put faith in our life, we sit. That is our practice. When our life is based on respect and complete trust, it will be completely peaceful. It will be completely peaceful. Our relationship with nature should also be like this. We should respect everything, and we can practice respecting things in the way we relate with them. This morning, when we were bowing in the zendo, we heard a big noise overhead, because upstairs in the dining room, people were pushing chairs across the tile floor without picking them up. This is not the way to treat chairs, not only because it may disturb the people who are bowing in the zendo underneath, but also because fundamentally this is not a respectful way to treat things. To push the chairs across the floor is very convenient, but it will give us a lazy feeling. Instead of respecting things, we want to use them for ourselves, and if it is difficult to use them, we want to conquer them. This kind of idea does not accord with the spirit of practice. In the same way, my teacher Kishisawa Ian did not allow us to put away the amado more than one at a time. Do you know the amado? They are wooden doors outside of the shoji screens, which are put to protect the shoji from storms. At the end of the building, there's a big box for storing the amado. Since they are sliding doors, one priest can easily push 5 or 6 doors, and another priest can wait and put them in the box. But my teacher didn't like this. He told us to move them one by one, so we would slide each door and put it in the box, one door at a time. When we pick up the chairs one by one carefully, without making much noise, then we will have the feeling of practice in the dining room. When we pick up the chairs one by one carefully, without making much noise, then we will have the feeling of practice in the dining room. We will not make much noise, of course, but also the feeling is quite different. When we practice this way, we ourselves are Buddha, and we respect ourselves. To care for the chairs means our practice goes beyond the zendo. If we think it is easy to practice because we have a beautiful building, that is a mistake. Actually, it may be quite difficult to practice with a strong spirit in this kind of setting, where we have a handsome Buddha and offer beautiful flowers to decorate our Buddha hall. We Zen Buddhists have a saying that with a blade of grass we create a golden Buddha which is 16 feet high. That is our spirit, so we need to practice respect for things. I don't mean that we should accumulate many leaves of grasses to make a big statue, but until we can see a big Buddha in a small leaf, we need to make much more effort. How much effort, I don't know. Some people may find it quite easy, but for someone like me, great effort is needed. Although seeing a large golden Buddha in a large golden Buddha is easier, when you see a large Buddha in a blade of grass, your joy will be something special. So we need to practice respect with great effort. In this Zendo, everyone can come and practice our way, experienced students and also those who don't know anything about Zen. Both will have difficulties. New students will have difficulties that they could never have imagined. All students have a double duty to do their own practice and to encourage those who have just come. Without telling them, you should do this or you should do that. Without telling them, you should do this or you shouldn't do that. The old students should lead the new students so that they can practice our way more easily. Even though newer students don't know what Buddhism is, they will naturally have a good feeling when they come to a beautiful Buddha hall. That is the ornament of a Buddha land. But for Zen Buddhists especially, the true ornament of the Buddha hall is the people who are practicing there. Each one of us should be a beautiful flower, and each one of us should be Buddha, leading people in our practice. Whatever we do, we are considering how to do this. Since there are no special rules for how to treat things or how to be friendly with others, we keep studying what will help people practice together. If you don't forget this point, you will find out how to treat people, how to treat things, and how to treat yourself. This is what we call the Bodhisattva way. Our practice is to help people, and to help people, we find out how to practice our way on each moment. To stop our thinking and to be free from emotional activity when we sit is not just a matter of concentration. This is to rely completely on ourselves, to find absolute refuge in our practice. We are just like a baby who's in the lap of its mother. I think we have a very good spirit here in this Zendo. I am rather amazed at the spirit, but next question is how to extend this spirit to your everyday life. You do it by respecting things and respecting each other, because when we respect things, we will find their true nature. Because when we respect things, we will find their true life. When we respect plants, we will find their real life, the power and beauty of flowers. Though love is important, if it is separated from respect and sincerity, it will not work. With big mind and with pure sincerity and respect, love can really be love. So let's try hard and find out how to make a blade of grass into a big Buddha. Thank you very much. Observing the precepts. When you observe the precepts without trying to observe the precepts, that is true observation of the precepts. In the full lotus position, we cross the right leg over the left and the left leg over the right. Symbolically, the right is activity and the left is the opposite, calmness of mind. If the left is wisdom, the right is practice. And when we cross our legs, we don't know which is which. So even though we have two, symbolically we have oneness. Our posture is vertical, without leaning right or left, backward or forward. This is an expression of perfect understanding of the teaching that is beyond duality. When we extend this, we naturally have precepts and the study of how to observe our precepts. This posture of Zazen is not just a kind of training, but it is the actual way of transmitting Buddha's teaching to us. Words by themselves are not good enough to actualize his teaching, so it is transmitted through activity or through human relationship. In addition to precepts, we have the relationship between teacher and disciple. The disciple must choose the teacher, and then the teacher will accept the disciple. although sometimes a teacher may recommend another teacher. Between teachers, there should not be any conflict, so if a teacher thinks another is more qualified, he may recommend him or her. Once you become a disciple, devote yourself to studying the way. At first, as a disciple, you may wish to practice with a teacher not because you want to study Buddhism, but for some other reason. Still, it doesn't matter, you know. If you devote yourself completely to your teacher, you will understand. You will be your teacher's disciple, and you can transmit our way. This relationship between teacher and disciple is very important, and at the same time it is difficult for both teacher and disciple to be teacher and disciple in its true sense. So they should both make their best effort. Teacher and disciple practice various rituals together. Rituals are more than just training. Through rituals, we communicate and transmit the teaching in a true sense. We put emphasis on selflessness. When we practice together, we forget our own practice. It is each individual's practice, yet it is also for others' practice. For instance, when we practice chanting, we say, "Recite the sutra with your ears." Then, with our ears, we listen to others, while with our mouths, we practice our own practice. Here, we have complete egolessness in its true sense. Egolessness does not mean to give up your own individual practice. True egolessness has forgotten egolessness. As long as you believe, my practice is egoless, that means you stick to ego, because you stick to giving up ego-centered practice. When you practice your own practice together with others, then true egolessness happens. That egolessness is not just egolessness. It also includes ego practice, but at the same time it is the practice of egolessness that is beyond ego or egolessness. Do you understand? This is also true in the observation of precepts. If you try to observe the precepts, that is not true observation of the precepts. When you observe the precepts without trying to observe the precepts, that is true observation of the precepts. Our inmost nature can help us. When we understand the precepts as an expression of our innermost nature, that is the way as it is. Then there are no precepts. When we are expressing our inmost nature, no precepts are necessary. So we are not observing any precepts. On the other hand, we have the opposite nature. So we want to observe our precepts. We feel that the necessity of observing the precepts will help us. And when we understand the precepts in this negative or prohibitory sense, that is also the blossoming of our true nature. So we have a choice of how to observe precepts, one negative and the other positive. Also, when we do not feel that we can observe all the precepts, then we can choose the ones that we feel we can work with. Precepts are not rules set up by someone. Since our life is the expression of our true nature, if something is wrong with that expression, then Buddha will say that is not the way. Then you will have precepts. The actual event or fact is first, not the rules. So it is the nature of precepts that we have a chance to choose our precepts. If you go one way, you will have these precepts, and if you take another way, you will have some other precepts. Whether you go this way or that way is up to you. Either way, you will have some precepts. At first, you should depend on your teacher. This is the best way, and you begin by following the prohibitory precepts. When you become familiar with our way, you will have a more positive observation of the precepts. How a teacher points out the student's mistakes is very important. If a teacher thinks that what his students did is a mistake, if the teacher thinks that what his student did is a mistake, he is not a true teacher. It may be a mistake, but on the other hand, it is an expression of the student's true nature. When we understand this, we have respect for our students' true nature, and we will be careful how we point out mistakes. In the scriptures, 5 points are made about how to be careful. One is that the teacher has to choose his opportunity and not point out the student's mistake in front of many people. If possible, the teacher points out the mistake personally in an appropriate time and place. Secondly, the teacher is reminded to be truthful, which means the teacher does not point out his disciple's mistake just because he thinks it is a mistake. When the teacher understands why the disciple did so, then he can be truthful. The third reminder is for the teacher to be gentle and calm and speak in a low voice rather than shouting. This is something very delicate, like truthfulness, but here the scriptures puts emphasis on having a calm, gentle attitude when talking about someone's mistake. The fourth one is that the teacher gives advice or points out the disciple's mistakes. The fourth one is that the teacher gives advice or points out the disciple's mistake solely for the sake of helping him and does not do this just to get something off his chest. Here, the teacher is very careful, noticing when the student is making some excuse for what he did or when the student is not serious enough. Then the teacher should ignore him until he becomes more serious. Even though we give advice only for the sake of helping the student, still, this does not mean to always be easy with the student. Sometimes we should be very tough with the student, or we cannot help in a true sense. The last one is to point out the student's mistake with compassion, which means that the teacher is not just the teacher, but also the disciple's friend. As a friend, the teacher points out some problem or gives some advice. So it is not easy to be a teacher or to be a student, and we cannot rely on anything, even the precepts. We have to make our utmost effort to help each other, and we do not observe our precepts just for the sake of precepts or practice rituals for the perfection of rituals. We are studying how to express our true nature. Thank you very much. Pure silk, sharp iron. We refine silk by washing it many times, so that the threads are white and soft enough to weave. We temper iron by hitting it while it's hot, not to forge or to shape it, but to make it strong. Last week, one of the Sunday school children saw me sitting zazen and said, "I can do it." She crossed her legs and said, "Now what? Now what?" I was very interested in her question, because many of you have the same question. You come here every day to practice Zen, and you ask me, "Now what? Now what?" I don't think I can fully explain this point. It is not a question that can be answered. You should know for yourself. We sit in a formal posture so we can experience something through our bodies, not by my teaching, but by your own physical practice. However, to be able to sit in a particular way and to attain a particular state of mind is not perfect study. After you have full experience of mind and body, you will be able to express it in other ways as well. Without sticking to a formal posture, you naturally convey your mind to others in various ways. You will have the same state of mind sitting in a chair or standing, working or speaking. It is the state of mind in which you do not stick to anything. This is the purpose of our practice. Yesterday, a Japanese visitor was speaking about Japanese literature. Japanese people have been studying Chinese characters and Chinese culture since about 600 or 700 AD. And after using Chinese characters, they established their own way of writing. The same thing will happen here with our practice. 100 years after the Japanese government stopped sending students to China to study Chinese culture, we had an exquisite Japanese culture. In the Fujiwara period especially, we had beautiful Japanese literature and calligraphy. There was a lot of freedom. Artists and scholars studied the arts, philosophy and religion. They tried various disciplines and they had good teachers. The work that followed the Fujiwara period was not so good. According to my visitors, some of the later calligraphy was too formal and shows too much of the artist's ego. We cannot see any personality in their calligraphy. The personality we see in art should be well trained without much ego in it. I think you can understand the difference between personality and ego. Ego is something that covers your good personality. Everyone has a character, but if you don't train yourself, your character is covered by your ego. Your character is covered by ego. You cannot appreciate your personality. Through long practice and training, we get rid of ego. A word in Japanese that expresses this training is neru. Neru is how we refine silk by washing it many times, so that the threads are white and soft enough to weave. We also use the character for iron. We temper iron by hitting it while it is hot, not to forge or to shape it, but to make it strong. Hitting it after it is cold doesn't work. Training is something like this. When you are young, you have a lot of ego, a lot of desires. Through training, you rub and wash your ego and you become quite soft, like pure white silk. Even though you have strong desires, if you temper them enough, you will have strong, sharp iron, like a Japanese sword. This is how we train ourselves. This is not something for me to talk about, but something I must show you by my everyday life, which is not so good. I'm afraid you will study only my weak points. We should know why we practice Zazen, and we should be able to tell the difference between something that is good and something that just looks good. There is a big difference. Unless you train yourself through hard practice, you will have no eyes to see and no feeling to appreciate something that is truly good. Only when many people have the eyes to see or to feel something good will we have good teachers and students. This is mutual practice. Buddha was great because people were great. When people are not ready, there will be no Buddha. I don't expect every one of you to be a great teacher, but we must have eyes to see what is good and what is not so good. This mind will be acquired by practice. Even in the Fujiwara period, Chinese culture and calligraphy were far superior to Japanese. The Chinese people had various brushes and always used the brush more than the Japanese people did. The Japanese had fewer materials to make brushes. We had lots of bamboo, but few sheep or animals from which to make brushes, so our training in calligraphy was more limited than of the Chinese peoples. But even before Japanese people mastered Chinese calligraphy completely, they had already started a unique Japanese calligraphy. I find this very interesting. Historically, Buddhists have been very sincere about this point. That is why we have Dharma transmission. Chinese masters especially put strong emphasis on transmission. It is necessary to master the teacher's way completely before you are free from it. That is very hard practice. That is why it takes such a long time to be a Zen master. It is not knowledge, it is not some power. The point is whether a person is trained enough to be like pure white silk and very sharp iron. At the same time, without trying to do anything, you will be able to express your personality in its true sense. If we cannot see any true personality in a person's work, it means that he has not yet eliminated his habitual way. My own habit is absent-mindedness. I am naturally very forgetful. Even though I started working on it when I went to my teacher at the age of 13, I have not been able to do anything about it. It is not because of old age that I am forgetful. It is my tendency. But working on it, I found that I could get rid of my selfish way of doing things. If the purpose of practice and training was just to correct your weak points, I think it would be almost impossible to succeed. Even so, It is necessary to work on them, because as you work on them, your character will be trained and you will become free of ego. People say, I am very patient, but actually, I have a very impatient character. My inborn character is very impatient. I don't try to correct it any longer, but I don't think my effort was in vain, because I studied many things. I had to be very patient in order to work on my habit, and I must be very patient when people criticize me about my forgetfulness. Oh, he is so forgetful, we cannot rely on him at all. What should we do with him? My teacher scolded me every day, this forgetful boy. But I just wanted to stay with him. I didn't want to leave him. I was very patient with whatever he said, so I think that is why I am very patient with others' criticism about me. Whenever they say I don't mind so much, I am not so angry with them. If you know how important it is to train yourself in this way, I think you will understand what Buddhism is. This is the most important point of your practice. Thank you very much.